Hello and welcome to PRSay. This is the official podcast for the Houston chapter of the Public Relations Society of America. And I'm your host, Veronica Viso. We're thrilled to be here with you because I get the opportunity to introduce you to some of our amazing members. This is our chance to connect virtually and digitally on demand. So if you have not checked out all of our podcasts, make sure you go to your favorite podcast app, download them all and take a listen. Make sure you hit subscribe. And if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, drop us some comments and my guest and I can come back. So we are going to go ahead and get this episode kicked off with my dear friend, Kristyn Hunt Cathey, APR. Welcome to PRSay.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited.
Yay! Well, I'm most excited because we've known each other before PRSA and we've been involved in TSPRA, our other school PR organization that we've talked about before on this podcast, and we run in a lot of the same circles. But what I've never asked you is how you got into this. How did you get started?
Well, actually, after I got out of grad school, so I went to the University of Georgia, graduated from there in 2003, and I was like, what am I going to do? And my parents were like, well, you need to figure it out because we're done paying rent. So I left Athens, Georgia, came back to Port Arthur, Texas, and I said, well, I kind of want to just get started in however I can get in. And at that time, my mother worked at Lamar University in Beaumont, and she told me that there was a position open for what they called an instructor back then in the communications department. So I did my application, did everything on my own, and I was hired in fall 2004 as an instructor of communication. So that's when I started teaching public speaking because I had a broadcast background, which was originally my emphasis, TV news practicum, so on and so forth. So I started to kind of build up my resume in teaching different courses, but I always had that feeling as if there was something kind of more out there for me. And of course, as you know, when you're in higher education, unless you plan on, getting a doctorate and wanting to go the whole tenure research route, which for me, I really, really don't. That's more my mom. I wanted to do something else. So towards the end of my 5th year at Lamar, I ended up seeing that there was a position open for a speech teacher in Port Arthur Independent School District, where I graduated from. And I ended up speaking to my old high school principal, who has been assistant superintendent, Dr. Melvin Getwood. And he said, Kristyn, you're my baby in school. This is not for you, but I think there's a position coming up. Just like, give me, and he knows me so well. If you talk to him today, he's like, oh, she was something else. So I said, okay. He said, just give me a minute. And so the position ended up being media communication specialist. And that was something that they kind of created looking at probably one other school district in the area, which was Beaumont ISD, that had an actual, what we call a communications department. So when they created the position, he said, hey, now's your time to apply. So I applied. Thankfully, I ended up getting the position. But what I didn't know at that time, it was a one-person department. Yeah. And I didn't know anything at all. And so that became the trajectory of me just trying to figure things out. And that was I want to say that was in 2009. So they hired me in October 2009, which was my last full semester at Lamar. So I was actually going to Port Arthur ISD in the morning, spending like a couple hours there. And then I would come in and do my classes. So anytime I had free time in between teaching my course load, I would go to Port Arthur ISD to try to figure things out. Because, of course, it's a lot different from when I graduated from there in 1997 to now I'm there as an employee. Right. So that's kind of how I started. And, it's just been up from there.
That's amazing. I never knew that origin story. I love it. Yes. And you, of course, like many communicators have in the Houston area, especially, have had to deal with crisis. And you're probably one of those communicators who was feet on the ground, hands in the muck during Harvey and your community experienced such great loss. Tell us a little bit about how your communication skills really, you had to tap into them to just get your organization to the next level. Cause I know that for y'all, especially in that part of Houston, down in the Houston metro area down there, the hurricane was a lot more difficult than for others.
Yes. And I'll tell you, we were originally, when we sat around the table, we were looking at Harris County, Houston area districts, because you all had already kind of shut down. I think it may have been like a Thursday or a Friday. And I kept saying, Dr. Portery, let's pay attention to this. And some of the people, because I would have us either say, hey, Kristyn, you tell him. I said, listen, I'm bringing it up to him. He knows what's best, whatever. I said, my suggestion would be, let's just go ahead and shut it down a day early. He was like, well, no, we just started school. Let's just kind of play it out. And I remember seeing how dark it was outside one day. I said, Doc, We got to make this decision. So he said, okay, let's just, and the kids had already come to school that day. So we kind of shut it down. And I remember thinking, oh, this is going to be like any other little hurricane. You know, they say it's going to be here. It's not really. We don't know for sure. I remember picking some things off of the floor at my house. And I think the nugget may have been about 6 months at the time. And I didn't think anything of it because we go through it so many times. Sure. And I know people that are on the coast, you know, like Florida, the Carolinas, New Orleans, it's kind of like our mindset. I'm not saying it's the smartest one, but that's what we did. And I remember we were staying at my best friend's house in Beaumont because my husband at the time was working. He didn't want us to stay alone. And then I remember seeing on social media of people waiting in the water at their house. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And I was like, oh my God, that's so-and-so and so-and-so. And one of my best friends called, she was like, Chris, we're stuck in our house, like the water. And that's when it clicked, like, oh my God, like, what are we going to do? And then by this time, you know, we're up in the middle of the night, power is going out. And I'm pretty sure it's the same with you all. And just to fast forward, I remember finally going to sleep, waking up the next morning. We were able to have a little bit of signal. And my friend sent me a picture of my neighborhood. And it didn't look like it. Mm-hmm. It looked like, you know, a lake or whatever. Mm-hmm. And she's like, Chris, I'm so sorry. And I was like, what is this? And she's like, that's, you know, that's your neighborhood. I'm like, okay, all right. So I end up, we were listening to the radio and I heard that they were going to cut the lots at one of our schools. Mm-hmm. Well, I called, my superintendent was waiting in the water at his house. He was trying to get on a boat. So they were actually trying to get him on a boat, but I was talking to transportation. Can we get a bus to go pick up Dr. Portery? Let's do something to try to get him. They were getting out there. And of course, you know, whenever it goes to a disaster, that's part of our MOU with the city. They can do that. And we had just opened this campus. And I was like, hey, I'm texting you. They're getting ready to cut the locks. Where are you so we can come and get you? So he and his family, of course, had to be evacuated. They're at a hotel. The bus comes to pick them up. We're safe somewhat in Beaumont, but then we weren't. So we end up evacuating, trying to get through Orange. I'm nursing my baby in the back. I don't know how the Weather Channel got my phone number, but I'm talking to the Weather Channel on this phone. I'm talking to my superintendent on this line, like going like 2 different phones, trying to figure out what's going on. I had my baby in the back. My husband's trying to wade through the water. The line, I think it's like the sensor for your tire was beeping. It was just, and my husband's not from here. He's from Dallas. They don't experience that. So I know for him, instinctually, it was something different. And I just remember thinking, okay, what are we going to tell our families? And so what we end up doing was, because I handle all of the social media at that time, I had access to it as an administrator. I just started posting the same stuff. So I'm talking to the Weather Channel. I'm like, let's stay in contact with each other. What do I need to tell my families? We're talking to the city port author's office. Okay, what do we need to tell our families? So when we pushed it out, and I had just said a couple months before, guys, we have to be more present on social media. This is for our families. This is where our families are. They told us that. We did a survey, and thank God that everybody had already had a page set up, and I was able to have access to kind of share all that information. I mean, it was like daily. And I remember my mother-in-law, when we finally made it to Dallas, was like, you need to eat. Like, you need to stop. And I was just like, I can't. Like, we have to make sure our families, you know, are okay. And this was like the initial part was maybe about 5 to 7 days straight for me trying to get from Beaumont to da-da-da-da-da-da. And we were just like talking to different people. And I didn't realize till afterwards how much we really, really did. And talking to our principals. Right. And, you know, and people are calling, you all were calling, we're calling each other because everybody's like going through all of the things. And it's like, you know, I remember probably paying attention to you all's pages. Okay, well, families, you can't get to Houston this way. So that was another blessing too, to be able to look at other school districts like Fort Bend ISD and Aldine and Houston and even Goose Creek to see what are you sharing with your families. And we were sharing that too. Like, okay, we can't go through Baytown, but we can go through 90. Okay, we can't go through that way. So we were even talking to our families in our districts in the Lake Charles area, Capital Parish, which is close enough to us. What can we do? And that really showed to me how important it is to make sure that we have those channels ahead of time, make sure our families are tapped in, because if we did not have social media, what were we going to do? Our servers were underwater. Yeah. So there's nothing you can do with a website. And that's just amazing. And, you know, so many of us have
Hurricane Harvey stories, but y'all's was just so unique. And what I love is that you tapped into your network as a young school communications expert, and you tapped into your network, and fast forward all these years since, and you've learned and you've grown. Tell us where you are now and what you're doing now. Cause I love to see your career just go from there. Cause there's nowhere to go from there. Like that's a pinnacle of crisis.
Yes. You know, I'm very blessed because I'd actually applied for, well, currently I'm in the Goose Creek CISD, which is in Baytown, Greater Houston area. I'm the director of communications. I'm getting ready to start year 3.
That's it.
And, you know, for the 12 years that I was kind of by myself in Port Arthur ISD, there were opportunities for me to apply. And, you know, sometimes I would get to like number 1 or 2. And I'll tell you, and for all the listeners out there, especially those of us that are coming from more urban or rural districts, one-person departments, it can be difficult to try to break into those Houston areas. But if I look back on it now, I'm thankful because I realized that may not have been my time right then.
Yeah.
I don't believe that this is necessarily where I am right now. I don't believe it's my final stop, but it's where I'm supposed to be. And I'd actually applied for this position before, and I didn't get it. And then I end up something just, you know, I kept saying, okay, God, you know, if it's whatever your will is, I'm good. You know, we're doing whatever we need to do that allow me more time to work on my APR, which was a long 7-year process.
I love
you know, we
seeing
talked about that.
That's
you know,
right.
You're one of the people, and so many of you all in TSPRA that kind of helped me through that. And even in the process, when I was trying to get to this position, I was able to grow in TSPRA. And that was a blessing for me too, because honestly, TSPRA saved my life. TSPRA saved my job. TSPRA provided me with the tools that I needed to be able to grow, because I did not have a formal public relations background. There was only one class in undergrad, and I took it. And then there were none, obviously, that I didn't have in grad school. So I felt as if I was kind of starting from behind. But TSPRA provided me with access to people like you, and to Shalia and Kristyn and Melissa Tortorisi. And I mean, so many others that are from larger districts and had that experience for us to be able to have exposure. And I think exposure is, to me, so important. That will get you to like the next step. And I see people that were in my area in Southeast Texas that have gone on to different, you know, positions. Hannah Latour, who's one of my students at Lamar University, and she ended up working in Beaumont ISD, is now the director of community engagement at LIT. And I remember her from being a student, and, you know, and so many different people, and Renee, and so on and so forth. So there's opportunities there, but I'm thankful now, looking back on it, you know, after all these years, going on year 14 now, how important it was for me to really grow and not to take that as a setback, but just in preparation for whatever was going to be next.
Oh, well said. Yeah, absolutely. That is so well said. Well, Kristyn, how do you want people to connect with you? If we're in person at events, they can get your business card, but if they're listening digitally, how do they connect with you?
Yes. If you see me anywhere, please reach out to me. I'm an only child, and I would be personally offended if you don't walk up to me and say, hey, Kristyn, you know, what's up? You can definitely follow me on Twitter, Kristyn. That's KRISTYN 1203 on Twitter. I'm on Facebook, KH Cathey. That's CATHEY. I know it's different. And of course, I'm on LinkedIn at Kristyn Hunt Cathey, and I hope to be able to see you all. I definitely be coming to more events with Houston PRSA starting in the fall. I'll be at everything for TSPRA, and I really hope to connect with more people, because it's been really honor and joy to work with everybody, of course, with you, Veronica. I'm missing you so much at TSPRA, but I'll still be able to see you other places. So definitely I look forward to hearing from everybody.
That's right. And don't worry, the links will be in the show notes, guys. So if you're listening, go to the show notes, connect with Kristyn. You will not regret it. She is an awesome person to have in your network. Kristyn, thank you so much for joining us. It was awesome.
Thank you so much, Veronica. Thank you for everything.
All right, guys, Kristyn's amazing. Make sure you connect with her. She is a fantastic communicator, and she is always willing to help and put together projects and opportunities for collaboration. So make sure you reach out to her. With that, we will wrap up this episode. Make sure that you chime in on Facebook or YouTube by dropping some comments. And if you are listening on podcast, make sure you hit subscribe.